Hey everyone, and welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be exploring some really fascinating ideas about the future, you know, societal shifts, global trends, that sort of thing.
Sounds intriguing.
Yeah, we're diving into an interview with this guy, Clif High. He's a software developer who's kind of made a name for himself in the world of predictive linguistics.
Predictive linguistics, huh? I'm not sure I've come across that before.
Yeah, it's a bit out there, honestly. But it's basically using these algorithms to analyze just massive amounts of online text, like looking for patterns in the words people use, how often they use them, even like the emotional sentiment behind the words.
So it's like mining the collective online chatter to see if you can spot emerging trends and kind of get a glimpse of where things might be headed.
Exactly. And Cliff High's program is supposed to be pretty sophisticated, and he shares some pretty wild predictions in this interview.
Okay, I'm definitely curious to hear more, but before we get into all that, it's probably worth noting that predictive linguistics, well, it's not exactly mainstream science, right?
Right? Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, there are definitely some skeptics out there, and for good reason. I mean, predicting the future is pretty tricky business, and there's always the potential for bias or, misinterpreting the data.
For sure, we'll definitely be looking at these ideas with a critical eye.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that being said, I'm always up for exploring unconventional ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and Cliff High, he definitely has some thought-provoking ones, like his whole concept of these psychic impressions.
Psychic impressions. Okay, now you've got my attention.
So he believes that people, they kind of unconsciously leak their anxieties and hopes and fears through their writing, especially online.
That's interesting. So it's not like he's saying everyone is psychic,
Yeah.
but more that these expressions, these psychic impressions, they create a sort of energy field that his program can tap into.
Yeah, and he even gave this example about how some people are convinced that secret military tribunals are happening right now, like as we speak.
Oh, I've heard about that.
Yeah, and Cliff High's take is that this isn't actually happening now, but it's a future event that these people are somehow picking up on psychically.
Whoa, okay, so their minds are sort of backfilling around this unsettling premonition, creating a narrative that it's happening now to make it more digestible.
Yeah, exactly.
That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. It makes you wonder how much of what we believe about the world is actually shaped by our own unconscious anxiety.
Right, like maybe we're all just seeing what we want to see or what we're afraid of seeing.
It's a good reminder to be mindful of how our own baggage might be influencing our understanding of events.
Totally, and to maybe question those narratives that feel a little too easy or too comforting.
Now, another thing that Cliff High believes impacts his program's accuracy is internet censorship.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he argues that all this widespread censorship and even self-censorship, it limits the amount of like raw, unfiltered data that's available for analysis.
He actually talks about the early days of Twitter, like way back when, and calls it the Wild West era because people were more free to express themselves without fear of, being shut down or whatever.
Right, and he believes that kind of open discourse was like a goldmine for his program because it revealed people's true thoughts and feelings more clearly.
But now, with so much being filtered or suppressed online, he's saying we're missing out on crucial insights into the collective psyche.
It makes you think, if we keep heading down this path of increased censorship, what are the long-term consequences? Are we losing our ability to really understand what's going on beneath the surface?
Yeah, are we losing our ability to read between the lines?
Exactly. That's a
Yeah.
great way to put it. And even with this limited data that he's working with, Cliff High is seeing some troubling signs, particularly when it comes to the month of October. He actually calls it Red October.
Red October. Okay, that sounds a bit ominous. What's he predicting will happen?
Well, he suggests there will be heightened emotional tension and potential financial instability, all stemming from issues with the global central banking system, particularly the Federal Reserve.
So we could be on the brink of another major financial crisis.
That's what he seems to be suggesting. He even compares the current situation to historical financial upheavals like the ones we saw in 1776 and 1789.
I mean, those were pretty turbulent times.
Right. He paints this pretty bleak picture of hyperinflation and the eventual destruction of the central banking system as we know it.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot to process. We'll definitely need to unpack that more, but maybe before we get into all the potential implications of that, maybe we should shift gears for a second and talk about something a little more, well, cosmic.
You mean the sun disease?
Yes, the sun disease.
Right.
What exactly is that? It sounds like something straight out of a sci-fi movie.
Yeah, it does. He's a little vague on the specifics, but basically he believes there's an event coming that will impact the sun and consequently humanity.
Okay, and this will lead to the emergence of what he calls a sci-fi world.
Right. He describes it as a world where many of our current societal structures, like those sprawling shopping malls we see everywhere, those will be dismantled, and we'll see a shift toward more localized and self-sufficient ways of living, especially when it comes to food production.
So instead of relying on giant supermarkets, we might be growing our own food in backyard gardens or participating in community farms.
Exactly. And while the transition to this sci-fi world might be a bit rough around the edges, Clif High ultimately sees it as a potential positive.
Yeah.
A world where individuals are more empowered and communities are more resilient.
It sounds like a double-edged sword. A lot of disruption and change, but with the potential for a more sustainable and equitable future.
Yeah, it's a lot to wrap our heads around, for sure.
It really is. And to make things even more complex, Clif High introduces this concept of qualia, which he believes will be crucial for navigating the changes ahead.
Qualia. Huh. I'm intrigued. What are those?
I know, right? I hadn't heard that term before either.
Yeah.
So Clif High, he uses qualia to describe these moments of heightened awareness, almost like intuitive flashes that can guide our actions.
So like a gut feeling that carries a lot of significance.
Yeah, kind of like a sixth sense. He believes these qualia are trying to tell us something important, and that we shouldn't just dismiss them as random occurrences.
So we should be more mindful of those little nudges from the universe, those moments of synchronicity or intuition, and consider what they might be trying to tell us.
Exactly. He even shares this crazy story about how a qualia experience might have saved his life.
Oh, wow. Okay, I'm all ears.
So he was walking out of a store after reading an article about Bill Gates, and this huge glob of bird droppings splattered on the hood of a car he was passing.
Okay, that's pretty random. What does that have to do with anything?
Well, he said for a split second he saw an image of Bill Gates' face in the mess.
Ha ha ha.
Yeah, and he stopped to chuckle at the weird coincidence. And at that exact moment, a truck and a car collided in the intersection he would have been crossing if he hadn't paused.
Wow, that's a close call.
Right. It really shows how these seemingly insignificant moments, these qualia, can have huge consequences.
And how important it is to recognize them and not just brush them off as random events.
Exactly. And speaking of considering things, Clif High offers some practical advice for navigating the changes he predicts.
Like what?
Well, he really emphasizes the importance of focusing on both physical and mental health. Prioritizing local food production and being prepared for potential disruptions to our way of life.
So basically, he's advocating for a more self-reliant and community-oriented approach.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which, given the predictions he's making, kind of makes sense.
It does, for sure.
Yeah.
But he also emphasizes the importance of personal discernment and critical thinking when evaluating these predictions.
Right. We can't just blindly accept everything he says as gospel truth.
Exactly. We need to weigh the evidence, consider multiple perspectives, and ultimately make our own informed decisions.
It's about empowering ourselves with knowledge and taking proactive steps to create a future that we can all thrive in, regardless of what challenges might come our way.
Well said. I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We've explored some pretty mind-bending concepts, from psychic impressions and internet censorship to financial upheaval and the sun disease, and we've only just scratched the surface.
If you're ready to dive deeper into these ideas and explore the potential of this sci-fi world, Clif High talks about, be sure to join us for part 2.
We'll be back soon with even more fascinating insights and thought-provoking discussions.
Until then, keep those qualia receptors open and stay curious.
Welcome back. It's really fascinating to think about how these huge shifts that we're talking about might impact our everyday lives, on an individual level. And speaking of individual experiences, I found Clif High's own personal story pretty compelling.
Yeah, me too. He talks about facing some serious health challenges and how he used this mix of alternative therapies and mindset shifts to not only recover, but come back even stronger.
It's like he became his own personal biohacker, experimenting with different approaches to optimize his health and build resilience.
Totally. He goes deep into his research on things like specialized sleep formulas and the timing and quality of supplements. He's clearly put a ton of thought and effort into understanding how to support his body's natural healing process.
And this journey, it seems to have had a profound impact on his whole outlook on life. He talks about facing death and coming back with this renewed appreciation for how precious life is.
Yeah, it's like he went through this kind of alchemical transformation emerging from the fire with a much clearer sense of purpose. And that seems to fuel his desire to share his knowledge and help others navigate the potential challenges that are coming.
It's pretty inspiring to see someone turn their personal trials into something positive and empowering like that.
For sure. Now, he didn't sugarcoat things. He acknowledges that the coming years will likely be tough. but he also sees it as a time of great opportunity for personal growth and societal transformation.
He believes we could actually see a more just and equitable world emerge from the ashes of the old systems.
Which brings us to another interesting point he makes about temporal markers. These are like little signs or synchronicities that indicate we're on the right track, even when things feel totally chaotic.
He points to things like the recent increase in volcanic activity, which he sees as a sign that our solar system is moving through a new region of space with different energetic influences.
He also mentions the breakdown of global supply chains and growing awareness of the potential dangers of certain medical interventions as indicators of a big shift that's underway. It's like he's saying, pay attention, folks. The old world is crumbling and a new one is emerging.
And that amidst this transition, we need to trust our intuition and remember that we're not alone in this process. There are others who are also sensing this shift.
Yeah, and speaking of sensing the shift, he even talks about how animals are picking up on these changing energies.
Yeah.
He's noticed a shift in the behavior of his own dogs and the wildlife around him. It's like even the animal kingdom is recognizing that something big is about to happen.
It's a good reminder that we're all interconnected. Humans and nature are not separate. Perhaps by paying attention to the wisdom of the animal kingdom, we can gain valuable insights into navigating this uncharted territory ahead.
That's a really cool perspective. Makes you want to pay closer attention to the animals in your life and see if you can pick up on any subtle cues or shifts in their behavior.
It's all about being open to new perspectives, questioning old paradigms, and embracing the unknown with curiosity and courage.
And on that note, I remember something else Clif High discussed that really resonated with me. It's his observation about how people are embracing alternative health practices and moving away from reliance on the traditional medical system.
Yeah, he sees this as a sign of a broader shift toward self-empowerment and taking control of our own well-being.
He even suggests that as existing power structures crumble, including the financial system and the pharmaceutical industry, we'll see a resurgence of traditional healing modalities and preventative health practices.
He talks about the importance of boosting our immune systems naturally, mentioning things like vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc, and medicinal mushrooms like chaga. He even calls it the mushroom of immortality because of its powerful immune-regulating properties.
He's basically saying, don't just blindly follow the mainstream narrative. Take responsibility for your own health and empower yourself with knowledge.
That's a powerful message, especially given everything that's happened in recent years. It's about reclaiming our agency and trusting our instincts. We have more power to heal and thrive than we've been led to believe.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that. Now, bringing it back to this sci-fi world, Clif High envisions, he paints a picture of a world where people are more connected to their local communities, more self-sufficient, and more in tune with nature.
He even predicts the demise of shopping malls, which he sees as a symbol of consumers' culture. He envisions a return to more localized forms of production and commerce.
So instead of giant corporations dominating the market, we might see a resurgence of small businesses, farmers markets, and community-based initiatives. A world less focused on material possessions and more on meaningful relationships.
It's a vision of a more sustainable, equitable, and fulfilling way of life that prioritizes human connection, ecological balance, and a sense of shared purpose.
And while there will likely be challenges along the way, Clif High believes this sci-fi world is not just a possibility, but an inevitability.
He sees it as the natural progression of things.
He even suggests that this transition might happen more rapidly than we expect, especially once certain key events occur that trigger a mass awakening and a shift in consciousness.
What kind of events is he talking about?
He points to things like the potential collapse of the central banking system, the exposure of widespread corruption, and a growing disillusionment with the mainstream narrative. It's like he's saying, the dam is about to break, the truth is coming out, and when it does, everything will change.
Wow, that's a pretty intense prediction. But also kind of exciting in a way. It feels like we're on the verge of a major turning point in human history.
Right. And he believes those who are prepared, those who have done the inner work and built resilience in their lives will be best equipped to navigate the transition and create a brighter future.
It's a call to action to take responsibility for our lives and contribute to the collective awakening.
It's about recognizing that we're not just passive observers in this unfolding drama, but active participants who have the power to shape the future.
And that our choices, both big and small, matter more than we realize. It's a lot to take in, but also incredibly empowering.
This whole conversation about qualia, it's really gotten me thinking,
Mm.
It's like a whole new way of looking at the world, paying attention to those subtle signs and synchronicities that we might normally just dismiss as coincidence.
Yeah, it's about cultivating that sense of awareness, a heightened sensitivity to the interconnectedness of everything. And it's about trusting our intuition, that gut feeling that tells us when something is right or wrong, important or insignificant.
And what's so interesting is that Clif High, he believes that this ability to recognize and interpret qualia might actually become even more important as we move into this sci-fi world.
Yeah.
He sees it as kind of a survival skill, a way of navigating a world that's becoming increasingly complex and unpredictable.
He even uses the analogy of a martial artist who has to constantly train and refine their skills to adapt to changing circumstances. He suggests that in this emerging reality, the ones who are most attuned to their intuition, those are the ones who are going to thrive.
So it's like we're all being called to level up our awareness,
Mhm.
become more mindful, more intuitive, more in tune with the flow of energy and information that's all around us.
And to trust that inner voice that whispers guidance and warns of danger, even if it doesn't always make logical sense.
It's like we're being asked to step into a new level of consciousness, one that's more expansive, more interconnected, and more attuned to the subtle forces at play in the universe.
That's a pretty exciting prospect, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's like we're on the cusp of this huge adventure, a journey into the unknown. And while there will likely be challenges along the way, there's also the potential for incredible growth, transformation, and discovery.
We might even find that this sci-fi world is more wondrous and magical than we ever could have imagined.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive for today. But before we go, I want to leave you with a final thought, a question to ponder as you go about your day. Clif High talks about this shift toward a sci-fi world as a potential positive, a world where we can shed the old systems and structures that no longer serve us and create something new, something more aligned with our highest potential.
So the question is, how can we each contribute to building that world? What choices can we make both individually and collectively to create a future that is more sustainable and more fulfilling for all beings?
It's a big question for sure, but I think it's one worth wrestling with. And I encourage you to explore these ideas further. Do your own research. Listen to your intuition and engage in conversations with others who are also seeking to create a better world.
Because as we've learned from this deep dive, the future isn't something that's just happening to us, it's something we're all creating together.
Thank you for joining us on this fascinating journey into the mind of Clif High and the potential future that awaits us. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.